We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you is Wednesday, April 29th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today to represent the Gen Z is Fabio.
Great to be here.
Have you, also Niles with us.
Hi, good morning.
Both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're heading into the middle of the work week, and what better way to get over that midweek slump than by diving into a topic that's a little unconventional, a little controversial, but very relatable. So it's something that might make some people not in agreement and others raise an eyebrow. After all, when it comes to love and relationships, everyone really seems to have their own rules, and sometimes it looks like people even are putting those rules into writing. So today, we're going to start off by asking you, Fabio, what do you think about contracts between couples?
Well, it's quite surprising that nowadays we're seeing contracts being used more and more to define personal relationships. And I think that in any dynamic between two people, there's always room for disagreement. So it makes sense that people would want to be on the same page and have a clear agreement on the responsibilities. But the idea of having a contract, though, can sound a little bit dystopian. But I do think that we need to focus on the why. Why is this happening? And I hope we do so today, because I think there's probably a natural reason behind it, too.
Right. I think it's really interesting to see both perspectives, especially something like this. So what about you? What are your thoughts on contracts?
You know, in an ideal world, love, marriage, it's supposed to be a form of sacrifice, but without any guidelines, people are people, right? So the balance can be off more than just once in the entire marriage. So I can see why people want to write them now. But as Fabio said, it can seem a little dystopian and slightly sad in some ways, but perhaps necessary.
So in theory, love is about trust and mutual sacrifice, but in reality, without clear expectations, that balance sometimes doesn't always hold. So while putting it into a contract might feel a bit cold, for some couples, it's becoming less about romance and more about fairness and protection. And that's why we're going to talk more about this. But first, let's take a look at the screen. Marriage, and of course, having children can completely reshape people's lives, and often it's women who feel that impact the most. That's why a growing number of couples are turning to written agreements, looking to define expectations before major life changes happen. And recently, one type of contract has been drawing particular attention: prenatal agreements. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at the childbirth contract that recently went viral in Korea and what couples should watch out for before putting something like this in writing. Just as we saw in the video, what started as a private agreement between a couple has quickly turned into a nationwide debate. And as more details surfaced, the story began to strike a chord with many. So naturally, attention has shifted to what exactly is sparking such strong reactions from people. So for people who aren't as aware of this, of what's going on, so what's behind the recent controversy over this childbirth contract that's going viral?
So this is actually a story about a married couple in their 30s who are both working professionals, and was recently posted on an online community about the contract that you just mentioned. They had been maintaining a stable married life with dual incomes when the husband suggested planning for a child. However, the wife, who had usually been pretty hesitant about childbirth and raising a child, handed him a document a few days later, and it was titled Contract for Compensation of Career Loss Due to Pregnancy and Childbirth. And according to this contract, if the pregnancy is confirmed, the husband must pay the wife a lump sum of 50 million Korean won, which in US dollars is around 33,000 US dollars. And after childbirth, he must also transfer half of the ownership of an apartment in his name to the wife. The husband is also required to fully cover expenses for postpartum care and child assistance.
I think there's a lot to unpack with this couple. Like, is this
lot.
What kind of relationship did they have? Do they just have a normal, like a transactional relationship? Had they talked about kids before getting married or not? Like, there's so many things to. I mean, this is quite obviously a striking example, and really highlights how detailed and high stakes these agreements really can be. It also helps explain why opinions online have also been so sharply divided. So, why have childbirth contracts sparked such intense debate online, Fabio?
Well, you just mentioned it. There's a lot to unpack.
Right.
So it makes sense that the debate itself became also intense online with two clear sides this time. So on the one hand, there are those who support the husband that argue that childbirth within a marriage is a sacred act of love and that treating it as a contract or assigning a monetary value to it really loses the whole point. It's an absurd idea. So that belief is that you cannot turn a sentimental and emotional relationship into a legal obligation because that is not the point of love. However, on the other hand, there are also supporters for the wife who argue that at a critical point in her career, doing that sacrifice and all the physical changes can create a potential career disruption that is not beneficial. And that happens through pregnancy and childbirth. So the decision itself can become very difficult. So from this perspective, giving birth without any form of compensation that is secure could negatively affect her professional life, her financial stability, and overall the life balance that she has. So it isn't necessarily about transforming the meaning of the relationship and becoming just a legal matter, but more about setting up all of the obligations for each party in a written way.
I mean, I get where she's coming from, like you said. Like, what's so interesting about this is there's such clear two sides to it. You
Yes.
kind of understand where both sides are coming from. And also, like, to add on, like, for her, like, career-wise, like, she might be losing out on opportunities just
Completely.
because she had a child. Like, she might not get that promotion or whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to discuss here. But what
There's
do
a
you
lot
think-
of nuance, and it
Right.
doesn't like it's very divisive when it comes to opinions. But then in reality, every single individual would have a completely different situation in the same context.
Right. So in her perspective, she might be kind of trying to reach a compromise with her
Exactly.
husband. So I mean, what do you think is then at the core issue of this debate?
Well, I think, there's a lot of things to consider and so many different points. But if I were to choose one core issue, it would be the protection of women's lives, because we have been talking about childbirth, and childbirth is a process that directly affects a woman's life balance and her career, not to mention their bodies too, and the way that they have to change their lifestyle. So the decision is very big. So in many cases, there aren't enough benefits or protections in place, which makes that decision even more difficult. And it's honestly a fact, a very bad fact, honestly, but it's a fact that women are still disproportionately affected by pregnancy,
Right.
childbirth, and childcare in especially legal and work contexts in comparison to men. And although many countries have systems that allow for parental leave, there are still clear limitations, and the responsibilities during that process, I would say, remain pretty much unbalanced.
So now you among us, you're the only one that's actually married and also has a kid. So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it really is this clash between ideals, expectations, and reality, and that's bound to happen at least once or twice in a marriage. No, I'm kidding, every day. But however, I would like to play the devil's advocate on the matter. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have contracts, but I do believe that it's possible to do without one. As I always tell people when they're dating, it's not always just about feeling good or having fun. Sometimes it can be. But when you're considering marriage, in a way, just like this contract, you're thinking about what this other person can give to you. You're making this deal, understanding their point of view, their values, how you're going to pursue different paths in life. And if it matches, then you get married. But of course, people can change over the course of different times, but hopefully it's somebody that you can work out through conversations and actually come to mid-grounds and go over the bumps through conversations. Because no matter how many contracts you write, when it's violated, it's violated. The damage is done. It's quite a finite way of approaching a relationship. And I personally believe that the core that needs to be highlighted in all of this is actually something that you have beyond the contract. Do you have that or not? And that's trust. If you already have that trust existing, the contract is actually just a formality and yes, a safety net. But if you don't, then it becomes either a document to act on someone and attack them, or sometimes a necessary protection?
I think that's an answer that you can give as a married person. I think it's because it's so true. I think marriage is a sacrifice. Everyone says that. And I think if you take out the emotional aspect of it, you can kind of see where they're coming from. But at the same time, where does this end? Like, how practical is this really? Because people have different opinions on a lot of stuff. And so this gets to the heart of the matter, because beyond the contract itself, it reflects the real challenges many women continue to face. And for those actually navigating both career and family, this isn't just theoretical, it's also deeply personal. So now let's get a more personal perspective on this. So we asked our viewers by running a poll on the IDI News YouTube channel asking, would you consider signing a childbirth contract? And here's what the results showed. So a clear majority, 63%, said no, while 26% said they would be open to the idea, highlighting a significant gap in how people view the role of such agreements in relationships. So that split is pretty telling. While a small but notable group is open to the idea, the majority still seem uncomfortable putting something as personal as childbirth into a formal agreement, suggesting there's still a strong belief that some parts of a relationship shouldn't be reduced to terms on paper. So to get a more in-depth and personal perspective on this, we're going to be joined by a familiar face, someone well known to our viewers who has recently given birth. And that conversation is coming up right after break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out Channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Grace, a familiar face and former regular panelist on our show, now back with us after giving birth. So hello, Grace. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello.
Hi guys, it's so nice to see you.
So nice to see you. So Grace, what has been, I guess, your biggest concern since giving birth?
Oh my gosh. Well, I knew that caring for a newborn would be difficult, but the reality was so much harder, especially as I was trying to get through the postpartum recovery myself. And of course, there are minor daily concerns because every day is like literally so different. There are days when the baby throws up while I'm feeding, or just cries hysterically for no reason. So little worries and concerns do cause some anxiety because I'm always wondering if I'm doing things right. And there are also bigger long-term concerns, like thinking about how I'm going to take care of him alone once the nanny's time is over in a couple weeks, or sending him to daycare once I return to work, and so on. Yeah, everything is just kind of new and scary, but I'm trying to enjoy it because the baby also brings so much joy and is a wonderful new addition to the family.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Grace. You look radiant.
Thank you.
I want to ask, how did you and your spouse agree on dividing responsibilities after childbirth?
Honestly, we didn't really have a detailed conversation about the roles and responsibilities of each person. I think we just kind of take it one day at a time and we play it by ear, and each of us do what we can in the moment. So if I'm feeding the baby and I'm changing diapers, my husband will do the dishes, do the laundry, prep meals for us, and so on. And one thing that we actually naturally came to an agreement about was that I'd be responsible for the feedings throughout the night, since my husband is still working regular hours during the week, and I'm on maternity leave. So that just made most sense. And another thing is it's also been kind of an unspoken agreement that most plans with friends will have to wait, since we want to be as present as much as possible and help each other out. And it's just a hard time for all of us, even the baby, adjusting to new lifestyles. So I think it's important to prioritize this period and put hobbies and outings aside for the future.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us. My last question for you is, would you considering signing a prenatal or childbirth contract, despite you having said that many of these things are unspoken, would you want to put that into writing?
I didn't even know that contracts like this existed until I heard you guys talk about it today. But I thought about it, and if my partner had offered one, I'd be open to signing it. I just think it's a practical way to really prepare for the massive lifestyle changes that come with a new baby. And it would just be nice to have those important conversations and define what's expected from one another and how to handle the different roles and, other things like finances, responsibilities that could prevent arguments or misunderstandings to form later if those important talks hadn't been had. But since I'm assuming that these prenatal contracts are not legally binding and it's more of like a voluntary agreement between partners, I think it's also important to leave some room for adjustments and have some grace for one another so that you can be flexible for unexpected situations and not be so business minded or business oriented because it's family and it's not business. So that's my take on it.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for coming on today. And also, you're genuinely glowing. And it's also so nice to see you back on the show. And hopefully, I will get to see you back in the studio as well.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
So we just heard from a new mother about her biggest concerns after childbirth, how she and her spouse divided responsibilities, and whether she'd consider a childbirth contract if given the choice again. Now let's shift gears and find out what our panelists stand on this with a quick balance game. So the first one would be, would you rather earn a high salary but demand paid for childbirth, or have no income and no plans to work after having a child? So Fabio, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, this one's tough to navigate, honestly. I do think that anything that has to do with money and resources is always a source of tension, and I have seen that around me a lot with couples and friends and family. So for me, on a personal aspect, I would choose the first one just because having already settled that agreement in terms of finances and being able to divide it in something that would feel fair for both would be the best for me. But
Right.
I see the second option also working.
See both sides. So what about you, Niall?
Yeah, I already feel like this question is pretty balanced in and of itself because both options basically say that you know your strong suit, whether it be in finances and your career or childcare. And I say there's nothing wrong with someone who plans on being a full-time mother. And in fact, feminism is about empowerment of choices for women. So I respect that if we do choose the second option to stay at home, just as much respect for any woman with a salary and great career. But I do want to question, if you are a woman with a very high salary and demanding financial compensation, genuinely, are you wanting the baby yourself? Or if you're being forced, that's a red flag right there and you need help. But if you're wanting the baby too, my question is, if we're being calculative and official, would you have to deduct the percentage of how much you want and your own willingness into the said payment that we mentioned?
So that shows how differently people weigh financial stability and also partnership. And now let's take it a step further and look at the bigger picture of family planning. So which situation would you prefer to be in? So struggle with infertility despite stable finances, or have multiple children but live on a tight single income?
Well, now that I'm getting older, I'm considering having children. I see it as a viable option. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a non-negotiable for me. When it comes to infertility, first of all, I do think that there's nowadays even more ways to start a family. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that a main struggle that I'm focusing on. But still, having kids would be nice, but still something that I'm a little bit ambiguous about. So for that reason, I would choose the economical stability so that inside the relationship, we are able to live comfortably.
So as someone with a kid, actually, what are your thoughts on this?
You know what? I already am living the second option. But honestly, I choose the second option because I'm actively choosing that option. Mind you, I'm not procreating beyond my financial capabilities at the moment, but not being able to physically conceive is a very deeply hurting issue for many couples out there. And if you ask them, it's actually not such a simple answer whether they would choose a financial stability for both of them versus being physically able to have biological children. So the choice between the two are quite difficult. On the other hand, having a child and personally being able to choose the amount that I have to work and how much I make versus how much time I can spend with my child, I think we have somewhat of a control over that, which is a luxury and also something that I'm really grateful for. So again, Option 2.
So both choices do come with real challenges and no real easy answers. It also brings up the question of personal priorities and also long-term fulfillment. So our last one is, would you rather quit your job to focus on raising a child or stay child-free and fully pursue your career, Fabio?
I'm quitting. No, I do think both options, again, would be very nice. But if I'm able to comfortably devote myself to my children, I would do so. I know that I mentioned that it's still not a non-negotiable for me, that I'm still just considering having children. But if the situation comes, I feel like focusing on the process of education and their own activities would probably hold a lot more weight than my own personal career. But I can also see how people would go out of their way to like continue their own journey so that they can also sustain their family. But in my case, if I'm comfortable enough, I'm probably quitting.
Fair enough. What about you, Naya?
As well, as long as there's financial backup. I guess I could quit my job and just focus on raising a child, or I could play the role of the breadwinner if it's necessary. I'm flexible to be whatever part in the family that I created that's necessary for that time being. And mind you, I love my career. I love doing what I do, but I wouldn't be happy without a family behind me. So no matter what opportunity is in my face right then, if it comes at the cost of having a healthy family, I would gladly let that go.
So there are some interesting perspectives that we just talked about, and it shows just how complex these decisions can be. But this isn't just a local conversation, it's also happening globally as well. So are there similar childbirth-related contracts, Fabio, in other nations?
Well, yes, in Western countries such as the United States and many parts of Europe, it's quite common to draw up prenuptial agreements, often shortened to prenups. And these agreements sometimes include clauses related to childbirth, and they are generally used as a way to protect the assets and the responsibilities of each party. We see this often in high-profile cases, for example, celebrities like Beyonce with Jay-Z, or Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, and so on. Well, often these are mentioned to have signed similar types of agreements, and even TV shows sometimes frequently depict prenups that include provisions for financial compensation to the wife upon childbirth. And additionally, in some parts of the Middle East, there is a custom called mahr. And I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And while it's not exactly the same as a formal legal contract, it does involve the exchange of property upon marriage. So in some cases, especially in royal and aristocratic families, in any culture pretty much, the husband would provide a lump sum of money to the wife when children are born. So we are seeing a lot of different strategies to handle the same problem.
Right, so this is one of the rare incidents where we can really see from both perspectives. So there are, I'm sure, a good amount of people who are really seriously considering this. So what should, for those who are considering this, what should couples keep in mind?
Yeah, if you are going to be writing a contract, then maybe you want it to be valid, right?
Yes.
But first of all, in Korea, contracts that directly tie physical and personal matters into, such as childbirth, into financial conditions are very likely to be considered invalid under civil law for violating public order. So if you do want to write it into a contract and make it legal, talk to a legal professional. But my take on this is that pregnancy and childbirth should fundamentally be based on love between the spouses rather than one side being forced into it. So attempting to reduce everything to monetary terms to get back in return, it may not be a very healthy option. But I do think there's good ways to do it, like community, friends, and family to really keep you in check for that.
Right, and at the end of the day, whether you see marriage contracts as practical or pessimistic may come down to how you define trust in a relationship. For some, it's about putting faith in each other, while for others, it's about putting things in writing to avoid uncertainty. And either way, the growing debate shows that love and partnership are being redefined in a very real and modern way. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Fabio.
Thank you for having me.
And also Niall.
No problem.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully the only thing you'll feel like you have to sign is a receipt and not a relationship contract. We are
News Generation.